is going to start. Alrighty, so we are now in Hilchos Tzitzis for hands-on halacha, and this is Siman Ches of the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, which is towards the beginning, the 8th siman of the entire thing, and we are now in Sif Ches, number 8. And here, the Shulchan Aruch says something very interesting. Yechavein bisat behis atafo. A person should have a special kavanah, special intent. He should be thinking something special when he puts on his tzitzis. What's that? Shetzivanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu l's'atei bo kedei shenizkor kol mitzvos of la'atzosa. That a person should wear tzitzis in order to remember all the mitzvahs that Hashem has commanded us. That is what we're supposed to have in mind. And this, so the Mishnah Berurah here makes a very important point, and he says that this is a second kavanah. There's the first basic kavanah, which applies to every single mitzvah that we do, and that is to have kavanah l'shem mitzvah, that I'm doing a mitzvah, which is exactly as it sounds, that I'm putting on this tzitzis, I'm putting on these tefillin, I am shaking this lulav because Hashem commanded me to do it. I'm not just doing it for fun. I'm doing it because Hashem commanded me to do it. That applies to everything, including tzitzis. But tzitzis has a special second kavanah, which is that I'm wearing tzitzis in order to remember all the mitzvos of the Torah. And this is taken straight out of the Torah itself. The Torah says you should wear tzitzis. You know what I should get? Let me get the exact language from Shema. There you go. I went all the way to the bookshelf in the shul. It's a little quicker when it's virtual. So the third parsha of Shema is all about tzitzis. And it says, you should wear them, laman tizkeru v'asisim es kol mitzvosai, in order that you should remember and you should do all of my mitzvahs. Let me read it a little bit earlier. V'haya lachem l'tzitzis. They should be for you tzitzis. U'yisamoso, you should see them, and we're going to come back to that soon. U'zachartem es kol mitzvos Hashem. You should remember all the mitzvahs of Hashem, v'asisim osam, and you should do them. That is what the Shulchan Aruch focuses on. It's interesting that if you continue in the pasuk here, there's a little, the Torah gives a little more detail. You should not be drawn after your hearts, and after your eyes, that you stray after them. The Torah very insightfully pinpoints the source of sin. It's the heart and the eyes, right? Chazal say, you see something with your eyes, and then that arouses the heart, the emotions, and then it leads to action. That's the process. So we want to preempt the Yetzer Hara by focusing our eyes on something positive, focusing our eyes on the tzitzis, they're minus of the mitzvahs. So that is the special extra kavanah we have when we put on our tzitzis. Now, for extra credit, do any of you guys know the two other mitzvahs in the Torah? Okay, only two other mitzvahs in the Torah where there's an extra kavanah one is supposed to have. You're doing this for some type of special reason, and in both cases, it's because the Torah itself has stated a reason for the mitzvah. What do we say? Go ahead, for extra credit. You can guess. Guessing is also counts. Go for it, Chaim. You unmuted yourself, but I still can't hear you.
Is it Lulav?
Are you guys hearing him? I'm not hearing him.
Does this work now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Oh, is it Lulav?
No, not lulav.
It has to do with Sukkos though, right?
Yes.
Is it the Lashed Basuka?
Yeah, the sukkah itself. Sitting in the sukkah is one of the three. When in regards to sitting in the sukkah, the Torah says, "Laman ye," you should besukos hashavtis b'nei Yisrael. Laman yedu doraseichem. Sorry, teishu besukos. Laman yedu doraseichem ki besukos hashavtis b'nei Yisrael. We sit in a sukkah so that we should remember for all generations that Hashem placed us in sukkos. Either that's referring to the clouds of glory or it's referring to the physical sukkos, whichever opinion you follow in the Gemara there. Either way, it's to remember that. So so far we got 2 out of 3. Tzitzis and sukkah. Anyone want to take a stab at number 3? Number 3 is the tefillin. The tefillin
Oh, I was about to say.
What? Easy one, right? Let me see. Yeah, there the Torah says, "Laman tiyeh Torah Hashem beficha." In order, we wear tefillin in order that the Torah of Hashem should be in our mouths. So those are the 3 special mitzvahs. Okay, one of them is tzitzis. Bottom line, hands-on halacha point to take home is that when we put on our tzitzis, we have the regular kavana, if you will, for all mitzvahs that I'm doing a mitzvah. The added kavana that I'm putting on these tzitzis so that I should see them at all times and remember the mitzvahs of the Torah at all times. Okay, let's now continue. Kodem sheyivarech, now we're in Siftes. Before you make your bracha, ya'ayin b'chutei tzitzis. You should take a look at the strings. You should examine the strings of the tzitzis. Imhem ksherim, to make sure that they're kosher. Why? Kedei shelo yivarech levatala. In order that you should not make a bracha levatala. Okay? So this is why you see people in shul, they're doing that thing, they're checking out their strings, checking them out. What are they doing? I'm sorry, you couldn't see that on the camera. Let me get my towels. Okay,
You got that invisible wall that you grab things from.
That's right. Yeah, stepping through my secret wall there. One of the many tricks they teach you when you become a rabbi. So here we go. This is about as hands-on as we're going to get virtually. But here we go. Here's my. I keep on disappearing. I think I'm going to have to nix this virtual putting back on. Okay, there we are. So the Mishnah Berurah makes a very interesting observation. Why do we check the tzitzis before we put them on? What did the Shulchan Aruch say? What was the reason given? Was anyone paying real close attention? I don't know if I even translated it as I was reading.
So as not to come to make a bracha in vain?
There you go. Thank you, Ruvain. So the Shulchan Aruch says the reason is you should not come to a bracha levatala. You should not make a bracha in vain. Because if you've got broken strings and your talus is pasul, and then you make a bracha for the mitzvah of wearing a talus, and then you're not doing a mitzvah because it's not kosher, right? And then not only did you not do the mitzvah, but you made a blessing in vain because you made the bracha on the mitzvah. You didn't do any mitzvah. So that's what the Shulchan Aruch says is the problem. So the Mishnah Berurah points out, wait a second. What about wearing a 4-cornered garment without tzitzis? That's a problem too, isn't it? Right? That's what the Torah says. The Torah says you're not allowed to wear a 4-cornered garment without tzitzis. It's not just a positive commandment, it's a negative commandment as well. So why are we all of a sudden focusing on the bracha and not on that? So the Mishnah Berurah has a very interesting explanation, and he says, let's not forget about a halachic concept called chazaka. There's an idea called chazaka, which in English you would translate that to something like the status quo. And that means that you are allowed to assume that things stayed the way that they were unless you have a reason to question that there was a change. This is a halachic concept that applies to many places. It applies to areas of kashrus, to assume that an animal remained kosher and didn't have any type of what's called a treifa, a blemish that's rendered a non-kosher animal, that a lot of those halachas are built on the idea of a chazaka, that we assume things remain the way that they were unless proven otherwise. So therefore, the Mishnah Berurah says, guess what? My tzitzis were kosher yesterday, right? So if my tzitzis were kosher yesterday, then I should be allowed to assume that my tzitzis are kosher today. And I shouldn't have to check them in the morning. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's the logic for the Shulchan Aruch. The concern of wearing a four-cornered garment without tzitzis is covered by chazakah. The fact that they were kosher yesterday is good enough for me to assume they're kosher today. But a bracha levatala, to make a bracha in vain, that is a very serious offense, and that we don't mess around with. We do not want to rely on a chazakah, on a status quo from yesterday, when we go ahead and make a bracha. That's the reasoning the Mishnah Berurah gives. And he makes a fascinating point that this should have significant application. Let's say, for example, a person is going to wear his tzitzis. Let's say the way most people do it, they put on one pair of tzitzis in the morning. Then when they finish getting dressed, they go to shul and they put on their talis. The only bracha they make is on the talis. And when they make the bracha on talis in shul, they have in mind to cover the tzitzis they're wearing under their shirt, right? If that's what you're doing, then you should really only have to check your talis. You shouldn't have to check the strings of the tzitzis at all, because that's not where your bracha is. Your bracha is on the talis. And as long as you check the talis, you didn't make any bracha in vain. And regarding the tzitzis you're wearing under your garment that you put on at home, well, that I should be allowed to rely on chazakah. And if I knew it was kosher yesterday, I should be allowed to assume it's kosher today. That's the argument the Mishnah Berurah makes, and I think he maintains that according to the Shulchan Aruch, that's indeed accurate. However, the Achronim, other halachic authorities, they take issue with this and they say, no. It's true there's a concept of chazakah, of a status quo, but we rely on that when we have to. But when it's very easy to check for yourself and know for certain, that's always the preferred thing to do. So therefore, regardless of whether we're dealing with a bracha levatala or whether we simply want to make sure that you're not wearing a four-cornered garment without tzitzis, in both scenarios, we want to always check before we put them on. And therefore, regardless of whether you're making a bracha or not, you always want to check before you put them on. But there are a couple examples where you do not need to check. So number one is, which are very important to know. Number one is, the Mishnah Berurah says, if somebody is running late to catch up to davening, and if they check their tzitzis or their talis before they start davening, they are going to fall behind everybody else in shul, and they're not going to be davening with a minyan. They're going to end up davening on their own. Then you're allowed to rely on the chazakah and just throw on your talis and get down to business. That's example number one that the Mishnah Berurah says. Example number two is someone's called up to the Torah. Someone's called up to the Torah and they want to make a bracha on the talis before they go up to get their aliyah. So they should be checking the strings to make sure they're kosher before they do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but if it's going to cause a delay in getting up to do your aliyah, then it's okay to rely on the chazakah, assuming that you do know that it was kosher previously. That's what he writes. And he adds, in both cases, you should try to at least give a glance, give a look when you get a chance to get a basic idea if you're dealing with a kosher talis or not. That's what he writes. Now, in terms of the whole idea of getting an aliyah, that only applies if you're putting on your own talis. If you're putting on your own talis, you have to make a bracha. If you're putting it on somebody else's talis, so then you don't have to make a bracha, and then there's much less of a concern about putting it on without checking the strings first. There is, by the way, I'll just to inform you, you've probably noticed, or maybe you haven't noticed, shul talesim. You have to make a bracha before you put on a shul talis. So if you're not a member of that shul, you definitely do not have to, because that's like borrowing someone else's talis. If you borrow a talis, you do not make a bracha. What if you're a member of that shul? So you pay dues, and you have a share in everything that the shul has, right? It's there for you. You're a member of the congregation. They got that talis for you. So then there's argument to say that you are considered a shared owner of that talis. And if you're a shared owner of that talis, then then potentially you should make a bracha. So that is a point of controversy. And there are some people that therefore make a bracha before they put on the shul talis, if it's a shul that they belong to. Some people that still do not. There is what to rely upon not to do that. That's just a interesting aside while we're on the topic. Okay, that's the story in terms of checking. I'm just going to toss in two more details the Mishnah Berurah says, which are really important. One is that he says, if for some reason you're going to take off your tzitzis in the middle of the day, a person goes swimming, and they're off for an extended period of time, and then they're going to put them back on in such a way that they would then be obligated to make a bracha, and make a new blessing, a new bracha when they put them back on. So then, in theory, you would need to check the strings because you're making a new bracha. The Mishnah Berurah says no. In that type of scenario where it's a very short, contained scenario, and you're pretty sure that your tzitzis did not get damaged in the meantime, you can put them back on without checking them. It's only when you wore them for a whole day and, it's very possible that the string got caught in something and then they got damaged. That's why the next morning you want to check them every morning. But if you're just taking them off in the middle of the day for a couple hours and then you're going to put them back on, make a bracha, you do not need to check them. The second thing he says, and this is something that I personally do, I find it to be very helpful. He writes that you don't necessarily have to check them in the morning. If, and this especially applies to a talis, if you check them when you take it off and you put it in the bag for tomorrow, then it's been in the bag since you checked them. You don't have any concern that it got broken in the meantime. So then in the morning you could take it out, make a bracha without checking them, because you checked them last night, you checked them or yesterday, right before you put them away. So that is another approach, another way to check your strings before making the bracha. And I find that to be helpful because in the morning, inevitably, I never have quite enough time, to be 100% ready. So to have one less thing that I have to do before I get davening with the tzibor, with the minyan, I find to be very helpful. So that's what I try to do as much as possible. I check my strings before I put them away, and that way I don't have to check them when I take them out, before I put them on. Okay. So now let's move on to Sif Yud. Okay. Imlovish talis katan ba'od she'en yadav nekiyus. If a person puts on his talis katan, his tzitzis, that's the smaller one that you wear under your shirt, well, his hands are not yet clean. Now that is very likely to be the case because if you're putting it on first thing in the morning and you didn't get to your sink yet to wash your hands, so your hands are not clean yet, you're not supposed to make any brachas at all. So what do? Yal b'shena below bracha, you put them on without a bracha. Ukishiyitol yadav, when you later get a chance to wash your hands, yimash mish batzitzis, you feel the tzitzis, v'yavarich alav, and then you make a bracha. So this is common, especially I see my son does this in school. I'm just going to stand up for the demonstration. Actually, it's better when it's down. He'll get to school and he'll for davening, he tell the kids, gather your strings gather your strings, and then make the bracha and give them a kiss. So that idea of feeling, you don't really necessarily have to gather them all and give them a kiss. The point is that you take them out and you're feeling them. That is somewhat comparable to the act of putting them on, or just moving it around, that type of thing. And you do that before you make the bracha, after you're already wearing them, in a scenario where you weren't able to make the bracha when you first put them on. Now, the second part that the Shulchan Aruch says is really what's most relevant to us. O kishiyilbash talis acher. When you put on your talis later, yivarech alav, you make the bracha on that, v'chav niftar gam hazeh, and you have intention to cover the tzitzis you're wearing under your clothes. In that scenario, you don't have to be moving the first tzitzis that you put on. So this is what we spoke about in the past, that if you're going to put on a talis at shul, then you make the bracha on that, and you have in mind to cover the tzitzis that you already put on at home. And in that scenario, it doesn't matter if your hands weren't clean when you put on your tzitzis at home, because you're not making the bracha on those tzitzis anyways. So that is just the easy way to go. That's why I gave the example of my son. My son, my 8-year-old son, or 7-year-old still, at school, he's not putting on a talis, right? He's a little kid. Or even a bar mitzvah boy, most men do not wear a talis until they get married. So if they put on that talis before they washed until Sidayim, before they washed their hands in the morning, they would then move it around and then make the bracha after they have washed their hands. The Mishnah Berurah reiterates here that there are advantages to the way that we do it, where we only make one bracha at the end when we put on the talis, as opposed to making a bracha on the first tzitzis that we put on first thing in the morning. Number one is you could be avoiding a potential problem of an unnecessary bracha, right? There's a concept called the bracha she'eina tzricha, an unnecessary bracha. You're never supposed to make extra brachas when you can get away with less. So if you're putting on your talis under your shirt and then going straight to shul and putting on your bigger talis, then really there's no need to be making two brachas. So to make the bracha on the smaller one as well as your talis is really making two brachas when you could be making one. That would be an unnecessary bracha, which you're supposed to avoid. That's point number one. Point number two is that these smaller tzitzis, certainly in the times of the Mishnah Berurah today, this is much less of a concern. But when things were not as readily available as they are today, it was not uncommon that you would have something wrong with your tzitzis. They'd be too small, or they would be sewn up and only separated at the corners, and then maybe it's not separated far enough up, or different potential problems, and therefore it's not ideal to be making a bracha on that in the first place. So that's why it's always better to make your bracha on your talis. It's nice and big. It's totally kosher without questions. That's the ideal way to go. Okay. And this next thing is really interesting. So the Shulchan Aruch says as follows: Iker mitzvahs talis katan. Connection was unstable. Did I freeze for a minute? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, let me back up for just 1 minute. So what the Shulchan Aruch just said is that really you should wear your tzitzis over your shirt, so you should always be seeing it and always be reminded of the mitzvos, right? That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Now that makes total sense because, as we mentioned when we started tonight, there's this special idea with tzitzis that the Torah gave us this mitzvah that we should see them and we should always remember the mitzvahs, right? If you're not seeing them, then you're not doing that. So this is where, if you ever notice, if you ever come across Hasidim, almost all Hasidim, they wear their tzitzis over their shirt. So here we go. I'm going to go into Chassid mode. Give me a second. There you go. I got it. So they wear it like this. You don't wear ties either, but they wear their garment over their shirt. A lot of them with the I don't know why, but the style I've noticed with most Hasidim is the wear over their shirt, and then they'll wear a vest over this, just the vest, but it will be totally visible, at the top or at the bottom where it sticks out. In Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, it's also very common to see people walking around with their tzitzis over their shirts, just like this. So now, why are they doing this? Exactly what the Shulchan Aruch says. You're supposed to see it. So now, why don't we do this? Why are there so many people that don't do this? So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah writes, number one, there's a question about what the proper language of the Shulchan Aruch is. There are those that have a different language in the Shulchan Aruch, that he says you should wear it under your garments, but that you should be wearing it at all times in a way that you could see it. So that already totally changes things. The Mishnah Berurah adds, but if you're going to wear it under your shirt, you should have the strings out so that you can see the strings. And that's why you'll notice a common style, which became much more common after the growth of the American yeshiva movement, that people will wear their tzitzis, coming out of their pants like this, right? That's very common. You see that all the time. And that's because of this idea. You're supposed to see the strings, because that's how you're reminded of the mitzvah. That's how you see the tzitzis, to be reminded of the mitzvahs. That's the whole idea, as we mentioned. Okay, so now the Mishnah Berurah does add someone who is spending time, someone who is going to be amongst non-Jews and thinks that it would be inappropriate to be walking around with their tzitzis sticking out. So then they can tuck them in. Now, what's interesting is that it seems like they had a method in the times of Mishnah Berurah where they would tuck them into the corner somehow. There's some type of pouch in there, some type of pouch in the corner where they would just tuck it right in like that. And then it just looked like a four-cornered garment. And he writes that to someone who's going to be spending his time with non-Jews, and they're going to see these tzitzis, and it's going to draw attention in a negative way, so then they should tuck them into the corners, and that's okay. Now, the Chavetz Chaim goes on a rampage about people who tuck in their tzitzis. And this is, I just want to read you the words, because you don't always get to hear the Chavetz Chaim go on a rampage. And it's pretty interesting. So he says as follows. Ba'ozana anoshim, those people, hamasimin hatzitzis, behamichnesayim shlehem, that they put their strings into their pants. Lo dai shema'ilim ma'alimin einayim, not only are they hiding their eyes, from that which it says in the Torah explicitly, you should see them and remember them. Od mitzvos, Hashem Yisborach. They're disgracing Hashem's mitzvos. and they in the future are going to have to pay judgment for that. How's that? So now, I just as a sidebar, the Mishnah Berurah seems to be taking a really strong position here, that they're disgracing the mitzvah, and they're going to be judged for this. Scary words to be coming from the Chafetz Chaim. I heard this directly from Rabbi Moshe Heinemann in Baltimore, a tremendous posek and Talmud Chacham. He says that we have to bear in mind that underwear, pardon my bringing this up, but it's relevant, underwear is a relatively recent invention. And that wasn't necessarily the norm. And when the Chafetz Chaim is talking, what the Chafetz Chaim is talking about is without that. The only thing a person was wearing, from the waist down was their pants. That was it. So when they talk in their tzitzis, their tzitzis are coming in contact with parts of the body that are considered dirty parts of the body, and that is what's a disgrace to the mitzvah. Today, where that would be very uncommon, and a person's wearing some form of underwear, boxers, briefs, whatever, it doesn't make a difference, but something that separates from those parts of the body and the strings, this statement of the Chafetz Chaim that they're disgracing the mitzvah, that does not apply. The idea of losing out on the very important idea of being able to see the tzitzis, that remains. That remains. But that extra thing of disgracing the mitzvah, that you lose that doesn't apply. Okay, so that's important. But let's keep reading the Mishnah Berurah, because he shares some really interesting thing about the importance of this mitzvah, and we'll end this tonight's class with this. He adds, those folks that they excuse themselves by saying, we're going amongst the non-Jews, we can't have our tzitzis out. It's good enough that they stick it into the corner of the garments. They shouldn't be putting it into their pants. Let's say they received a gift from a king, a human king, right? Let's say someone received a present from President Trump, from Queen Elizabeth. Shechakuk alav shem hamelach, and it has their name engraved on it. Donald Trump is engraved on the gift. How much would a person be adorned by it, right, in front of others? A person would be proud of it. They'd want everyone to see it. The kalvachom tzitzis. That is the way we should look at tzitzis. We should look at it as a gift that Hashem gave us, and it has Hashem's signature on it. And we should wear it with pride. And it's even greater. It hints to the name of Hashem, the King of Kings. We'll see later exactly how it hints to Hashem's name. How honored should a person be who has the privilege of bearing Hashem's name. Amru Chazal, our sages say, Hazir b'mitzvah tzitzis. Hazar b'mitzvah tzitzis, someone who's careful with the mitzvah tzitzis, Zocha v'ro pnei hashchina. He will merit to see Hashem's divine presence. Umashma min aksuvim, and it's also implicit in scriptures, the Hayudim sheyisharu le'es kates, the Jews that remain at the end of days, yu mitzuyanim b'mitzvazu, they will be adorned with this mitzvah tzitzis. Kamad it says, Ubo asar anashim mikol lashonos hagoyim, 10 people will come from all the different languages of the nations. V'chzik b'knaf ish Yehudi, they'll hold on to the corners of the Jewish people. What corners are those? The tzitzis. In the end of days, the nations of the world are going to be grabbing onto our tzitzis. They're going to be grabbing hold onto the corner of our tzitzis because they're going to recognize how special it is. The Amru Chazal al Zeh, and also our sages say about this, Kol Hazoyer b'mitzvah tzitzis, anyone who's careful with tzitzis, Zocha, he will merit, Umisham shemlo shnei alafim u'shmona meus avadim. He will be served by 2,800 servants. That's a lot of servants. It's obviously this. Our Chazal, our sages, are not referring to 2,800 servants that are going to come knocking on your door tomorrow and say, can I do your laundry for you, please? Would you mind if I mowed your lawn? Etc. But rather, it's talking about loss of level. It's talking about in the world to come, in the end of days, those who were careful with the mitzvah tzitzis are going to receive awesome reward. So it's something to think about, something to bear in mind when we perform the mitzvah tzitzis every day, to really cherish that opportunity and to make sure to do it as much and as carefully as we possibly can. Okay, shukayach. I just stopped the